It rained on the red. Keep the day. Robert Baratheon decided he would no longer be a king who knew only the heft of a hammer and the burn of wine. The storm came hard off Blackwater Bay, broken on the cliffs beneath the castle and hurled upward in sheets that rattled the shutters. Torches guttered in their sconces and the corridors smelled of wet wool and damp stone. Servants kept to the walls like shadows. From the high windows of the Tower of the Hand, the city below blurred into a smear of slate roofs, crooked chimneys, and the black ribbon of the Mudgate Road, all washed in a winter rain that should have come weeks earlier and had chosen to fall now, relentless. Robert sat before a table he had once used to play at Sivas with John Arryn. John had always been patient. He would make a move and then sit, embers of thought bright in his eyes, content to wait until the board taught his opponent what he would not say aloud. Robert had laughed at him for it, impatient, reaching for a flagon. "You and your books," he had said then, and it had been a jest between friends, and the jest had outlived the man. Now the table was crowded with ledgers and seals, sheets of accounts, shipping manifests, contracts with half their wax cracked or smeared. An iron lamp threw a steady yellow light across a crowd of numbers marching in tight columns, and the king dragged a thick finger down a page as if he could summon meaning by force. Peter Baelish had given him these at second command, smiling with that small, secret curve of the mouth that promised he knew more than any other man. "If it please your grace," he had said lightly, "though I fear I can be of little use without the cipher I keep for untangling matters." And then he bowed and slipped away like a cat, soft and amused. A laugh rose in Robert's chest and came out as a grunt. "Cipher," he muttered. "The cipher is that the money's gone." He turned a page, then another. The words were ink and bone dust and the faint oil smell of vellum. He tried to read them as he would the faces of men. A column for ships hired, a list of debts deferred, a note, almost an aside, recording a disbursement for certain pharmaceuticals and refinements for the royal apothecary, authorized by the master of coin, witnessed by the Grand Maester. His jaw worked and the lamp hissed in the draught. "Bring him," Robert said. Ser Barristan Selmy stood with hands clasped behind the white of his cloak, quiet as a pillar. He had not moved for an hour. It seemed to Robert the old knight could stand for a night and a day and not betray discomfort in his eyes. "Your Grace?" Barristan asked, not with doubt but clarity. "The old spider with the chain," Robert said. "Grand Maester Pycelle. Bring him to me now." Barristan inclined his head and was gone, leaving the king alone with the hiss of the lamp and the scratch of rain on leaded panes. For a moment Robert sat in the silence and heard another sound, very faint in memory. The hollow scrape of a wooden spoon along the bottom of an empty pot. Storm's End had been cold, and the bones rattled in the kettles like dice. Stannis had counted them. He had counted everything. "We will last if we count," Stannis had said, with the stubborn satisfaction of a man who could live on anger and bread. Robert had laughed then too, laughed at his grim younger brother and at the siege and at the gaunt men he led. And then, when he drove the stag banner against the lion and the dragon died, he set aside counting for killing and for living. He put his hand flat on the ledger. The vellum was smooth under rough skin. "The realm is not a hunt," he said aloud, and then he snorted at himself for saying it. Pycelle came with the soft whisper of robes and the faint, sweet rot smell that always clung to him, like dried flowers left too long in a locked room. He bowed deeply, beard streaming over the front of his gown, the links of his chain chiming. "Your Grace honors me," he wheezed. "I was abed with a draft. For the joints." "Sit," Robert said, not unkindly. The chair scraped. The old man went down into it with an effort, plucking at his sleeve and looking about for courtesies that never came. "You witnessed this," Robert said, tapping the disbursement with a nail. Pycelle peered nearsightedly. "A most ordinary purchase," he said after a moment. "Medicines. The Citadel replenishes what is used. It is only prudent." "What medicines?" Robert asked. "Roots and infusions and things that cannot help but sound strange to a layman's ear," Pycelle replied. "Rhubarb and senna for the bowels, foxglove tinctures for the heart when unsteady, Myrish nightshade for pain in moderation, salves for the lungs. He coughed delicately, as if to exhibit a need. Your Grace is troubled by a list that is not so very troubling. And this, Robert turned the page, thrust his finger down again. Marked under the same hand, rare alchemical acids, a flask of Lysini pale tears. One would think that a thing to sting the eye, Grand Maester, not the sort of draft I recall served at court. Pycelle started at that, and in a blink his hands folded tighter. There are names, he said carefully, that mislead your Grace. Indeed, merchants call things what they will to make silver. The substance you name is another matter entirely. The Citadel keeps knowledge of poisons to forestall their use, to counteract them when villainy is done. Did villainy find John Arryn? Robert asked. He kept his voice flat. He did not know how to do flat the way Stannis did. For him it was an effort, as if he were holding fast to a boar's tusk. You were with him at the end. You tended him. Did villainy find the man I called brother? Pycelle spread his hands, and the sleeves swallowed them. Lord Arryn was old. His humors were in disarray. He took a chill that never left him. He was not old, Robert said. The rain on the glass gave every word a beat. He was less old than you. He was less old than me. He leaned forward, knuckles on the ledger. He died quickly, and we buried him so quick we could not breathe for it. He died asking for a book, and you pressed the book on him that did not matter and then told me nothing mattered but the wheel turning, and that we must go on. I told you the truth, Pycelle said, and his eyes, washed pale with age, flickered with a spark of indignation. A truth the realm required. The realm cannot pause for each death, your Grace, or it would go mad with mourning. The realm requires something of you today as well, Robert said. He straightened. The chair groaned under him. He had been a bear of a man once. He was a great man still, gone a little to fat, gone a little to seed, but the bones of him were too big to shrink and the force of him too great to discard. He fixed the Grand Maester with the look that had sent men from his war tent to carry out his will simply because they had wanted to see that gaze turn away and look upon them with warmth again. It requires that you remove your chain. Pycelle stared, uncomprehending. Your Grace, you heard me. Robert's voice stayed level, but he felt the blood move in him as it had not moved in days. You are not my Grand Maester until I say you are again. By my leave, by my grace, by the realm's need. Until I know what hands have laid poisons at my table and what mouths have whispered lies at my counsel, you will be no man's counsel. He cut a look at Baratheon, who stood now with Ser Aerys Oakheart at his side, both white and straight as fate. Ser Baratheon, take Grand Maester Pycelle to the White Cells. He is to be afforded old men's comforts. He is to see no one and write no one. He is to surrender his seals to my steward and his keys to Ser Aerys. If any hand seeks to unbar his door but yours, it loses fingers. Your Grace, Baratheon said evenly, and though surprise flickered and was gone in his eyes, he gave no other answer. He moved. Aerys moved. Pycelle cried out, and then he swallowed it and set to trembling, and fumbled at the chain with arthritic fingers until Barristan's hands, gentle, large, rose to help him. The chain came free. Link by link the colors changed. Black iron, red gold, electrum pale as straw, pewter dull as rainwater. It made a low, pattering sound when it fell into Barristan's glove. The sound, Robert thought, of something old and soft falling to pieces. Pycelle looked up at him from a face suddenly bare. Your Grace, he said again, and now the wheeze was gone and a thin man's voice looked back. This is unwise. The conclave. I am the conclave here, Robert said, and the judgment I give is that I shall not be served by a chain I do not trust. He let his gaze hold Pycelle long enough for the old man to look away. Then he lifted the ledger again. Take him. When the door had shut and the sound of the guard's steps went away down the corridor, Robert sat very still until his jaw unclenched. Then he blew out, a long breath that finished in a low growl. He put one meaty hand on his thigh, one on the page. Varys, he said to the air. The eunuch came as if conjured. offered like a flake of ash on the turning draft. He bowed from the waist with a softness that made Robert wish to shove him. "Your Grace," he sighed. "I felt my little birds grow excited." He glanced at the door with the sort of mild distress worn by men finding an overturned hive. "Such a pity. The Grand Maester has served many kings. And that might be part of the problem," Robert said. "Close that door." When it was shut, he lifted the ledger. "I want to know what this meant," he said, tapping again. "Baelish smiles like a cat with a bird in its mouth. He gives me these books but keeps his own keys and whispers that the numbers will never sing unless he hums along. I'm done with humming. You will give me the names of every man who delivers drugs into this castle and every coin they touch on the way. I want the porters named, the carters, the guildhead who signs the bill of lading, the customs man who stamps it, and who calls his wife a fool after too much wine and tells her he takes a clip from each load and who hears him saying so." Varys widened his eyes a little. "You are most exact today, Your Grace. I don't intend to be, but I am discovering what happens when I try," Robert said. "I want the same for the city watch. No whispers, no little birds. I want numbers. I want the watch's rolls, their pay, their new armor, the coin they were given on the king's leave for the hand's bloody tourney and where it went. I want it in a pile tall as my belly. The good Commander Slint will be. Slint will do as he's told or he'll find himself in a cell beside the Grand Maester," Robert said. "And before the gods, Varys, if you have known anything you did not tell me about Jon Arryn dying, you will tell me now." Varys looked down, then up. "I tell Your Grace what the realm requires me to tell him," he said softly, almost with sorrow. "A realm is a peculiar patient, and its medicine cannot be served in a single draught. But I will give you the names you ask for, and the carts and the wives and quarrels. The truth is not always in a lord's bed. It is in the gutter. I have many friends in the gutter." He smiled with his eyes down. "You will have your pile, and you will have it soon." Robert leaned back, found the chair resistant, pushed it anyway, and let the legs thump onto the floor. "Good," he said. "You may go." Varys made a shape like smoke and was gone. When the door closed again, Robert's hands fell slack and he stared at the ledgers with a hot, dull hatred. He had always hated them. Numbers were a way of making a lie look clean. He thought of his brothers. Stannis would take one look and sniff that the sums were bad, then find where they were bad, then correct them. Renly would smile and say a word that made someone else do the work and then take the thanks as if he had due. And he it himself. It was not in Robert to be either of his brothers, and yet he felt both of them in him now like two currents beneath the same sea. He pushed to his feet and went to the window. Rain smoked against the glass. The city was a gray bowl. He could not see the September, but he could imagine the crystal high over it, catching nothing today but cloud. "Jon," he said to the rain, and was ashamed, and did not care that he was ashamed. The small council chamber was too warm by the time they gathered. Braziers baked the damp from silk and velvets and leaked a smell of hot metal. Renly, green and gold bright even in the dim, sprawled at ease and offered a grin that invited a grin in return. Peter Baelish twirled his little goatee and looked like a clever boy who'd traded up his toys but still liked to take them out and admire them. Varys shimmered faintly in dove gray and worry. Ser Barristan stood as always, white with a gravity that quieted the room. There was an empty chair where Pycelle should have been, and the hole it made gaped like a missing tooth. Robert let the silence go on too long. He liked to hear courtiers fill holes with their words. They showed what they valued by what they rushed to defend. This time, Renly moved first. "You have the look of a man who has taken too little wine and too much advice, brother," he said. "Shall I mend one of those ills?" "Try neither," Robert said. "Pycelle is in chains." Baelish's brows lifted. My, on what charge?" Renly asked, sitting forward, easy charm dimmed by caution. "No charge," Robert said. "On my pleasure. He will be there until I find out what he told me that was true and what he told me that was convenient." Varys sighed. "The Conclave may not approve. The Conclave can send me another old man with a chain who does not tremble for the golden lions when I raise my voice. Robert said. "Until then, I will have no chain. I will have numbers." He nodded at the table where Varys' scribes had, with a grace that would have made Stannis nod in spite of himself, arranged stacks of neat copies. "The Master of Whisperers has brought me the names of every man who brought medicines and other refinements into this castle in the last year. He has brought me the dock tallies, and he has brought me the city watch ledgers I demanded from Commander Slint." Baelish smiled a shade wider. "How industrious our good Varys is." Varys bowed his head, modesty painted on his face. "The realm speaks in many languages, my lord. I simply translate." Robert flipped a sheet forward. "This mark," he said. "Here is a note that certain vials came to the castle marked herbs for the royal apartments and that they passed the mud gate without inspection. Here is a name I know, Porther. He is the steward at the Red Keep, is he not? He has his mark beside it. And here," he turned another page, "is Peter's pretty seal on the disbursement. You signed 1,000 like it, I do not doubt." Baelish spread his hands. "A king must eat, drink, and be cured when in distress," he said lightly. "We do not clap for water when we drink it. And here," Robert continued as if he had not spoken, "is a purchase of what Varys tells me is Tears of Lys, declared as part of those refinements, twice in a quarter. A strange thing to keep in stock unless you expect it to be in the business of ending lives. It is illegal in King's Landing. You will tell me now who ordered it and who used it." Peter Baelish turned his small smile to the king and let it rest there, neat as a blade. "Your Grace, I sign what is laid before me after my men vouch the need. If Pycelle asked for medicines, I did not ask which for myself. If the Grand Maester makes a show of stockpiling for defense, I did not think it prudent to refuse. I do not ask for recipes. I provide purses." "You're clever," Robert said. "But you're not new clever. Jon Arryn asked for a book before he died. And Pycelle gave him a different one and told me to look the other way. I didn't then. I will not now." Renly leaned back, crossing a knee. He had a look that meant he thought he had found a graceful exit from a room full of knives. "Brother," he said, "if the Grand Maester asked for medicines we may not like and Baelish merely signed as he does, we are no further down the road to who harmed Lord Arryn, if any did. Put Pycelle to the question. It would be cleaner. This is all mud." "Numbers are not mud if you make them stand still," Robert said, and was surprised to hear how Stannis sounded in his own mouth. "Permit me," Varys said, one soft hand rising. "The carriage that bore those vials came through the river gate late at night, though the book declares it otherwise. The guards on duty that night were 2 men Varys named and has taken to the black cells for a question of their own. The porter's mark was struck in the morning by one of his lads at his order. The cart belonged to a factor named Osmond Kettleblack." At that, Peter Baelish's smile thinned as if shaved. "A Sellsword's father, if I recall," he said. "And Sellswords breed Sellswords who breed trouble." "Men breed trouble," Varys murmured. "The Kettleblacks breed what is paid for." Robert fixed Baelish with a stare. "Your name is on this paper." "My seal is," Peter corrected mildly. "If your Grace prefers, I will affix a different seal that suits his mood better." "Be as witty as you like," Robert said, finding the old rough kindness in his voice and letting it out like a hound. "I have another paper for you." He unfolded it, tapped. "Coin delivered at Commander Slint's order to the City Watch for new mail and helms and pikes. A large amount. It was delivered 3 days before the tourney in the King's honor, which I set aside because I could smell costs on it like a dead fish." The paymaster drew the coin. The coin went to a smith on the Street of Steel. "The smith never made those helms." "That seems unfortunate," Peter said. "The helms were made in Lannisport," Varys supplied. "A different paper shows it. The gold moved in a circle one could almost admire." "Almost," Robert said. He let an old grin out. "I have played at circles too. Once I made them in blood. I like these less." He stood. The chair grumbled. "Ser Barristan." The old knight looked up. "Go to the Guildhall of Smiths. Bring to me the masters who signed these papers. Bring me Osmond Kettleblack as well." Commander Slint is to attend me at noon with his books and his person, and if he brings one without the other, strip him of both and give him only a nightshirt to wear for his trouble." Baratheon bowed. "It is done. And send a runner for my brother Stannis," Robert added. "Tell him to bring whatever numbers he thinks will bore me. I find myself in a rare mood to be bored." Renly smiled faintly. "You will put half the city to gall and half to glee before midday," he said, standing to go when his king's look told him the council was ended. "I will have the Master of Laws ready to hear a dozen pleas and 100 complaints." "Good," Robert said. He lifted the ledger again. The weight of it felt honest. It was only vellum and iron clasps, but it felt like a hammer. "We will give them a show to talk of when the rain ends." When Stannis came, the rain had slackened, and the city had taken a breath between one downpour and the next. He came in a plain cloak with the stag of Baratheon picked small on the breast, and his jaw was a stubborn hinge. He bowed with his shoulders and not at all with his neck, and when he straightened he looked at the empty chair and the missing chain and showed no surprise. "I hear you've begun to count," he said, which from Stannis might have been praise. "I hear you intend to make me sorry," Robert said. "You do that yourself," Stannis replied, and came to the table and was already pointing. "This is a lie. Not the number itself, but what it claims to count. The tourney's cost is hidden. They salted it in wages and grain and the transport of grain. You will find that if you ask to see the carts did not move. Grain cannot come and go without a bell ringing somewhere. I do not hear bells. They will ring when I pull them," Robert said. "Sit." They worked until the brazier had to be fed again. Robert's head ached in a way that was not wine. It was a good ache, like the ache of a muscle that had not been used in too long. Stannis did not chide him the way he had as a boy. He measured facts the way he measured planks for a ship, and when a fact was too short he cut away the end that did not fit without gloating. Varys sent in a steady parade of men with ink-stained fingers and nervous mouths. Baelish's cloven tongue flickered and withdrew. Renly came and went arranging rooms for witnesses and guards. The morning passed like a slow blade sawing a rope. Osmond Kettleblack came in smelling of rain and horse and something faintly sour. He had the sort of face men forgot 2 breaths after seeing it. He wore a bold look like a poor man's shield. "Your Grace," he said, with a bow that wanted to be proud and was only practiced. "I answer what is asked, I do." "You own 5 carts and rents on 3 more, Stannis said, eyes flicking over Varys's notes before the man had set them on the table. "You are paid by a dozen factors and 1 lord. That lord is Peter Baelish." "His men," Osmond said. "His seal," Robert said. "You carried vials to the Red Keep. You carried them at night. You carried them in by the river gate and you bypassed inspection." "I had a seal of urgency," Osmond said, and now his boldness shook on his shoulders. "The Grand Maester's own. The watchman saw it and took it." "Did you know what you carried?" Stannis asked. "They pay me to carry, not to pry," he said at once. "You have sons," Varys murmured. "What is that to anything?" Osmond snapped. "It is to everything," Robert said, surprising himself. "Do not lie in my hall. If you do, your sons will live on what your wife can beg." Osmond swallowed. "I carried bottles in straw," he said. "They said they were medicines. The Guild of Alchemists sealed the crate as well. I thought it no business of mine. One of the vials was cloudy and one very clear. I did not break any. The man who met me at the gate called himself Cole, but if it was his name or not, I can't say. He wore gray with no badge, and he had a way of speaking that made you want to get it done and go." "Cole," Varys repeated as if tasting a word he knew already. "A name he uses. I have heard him called that in the Red Keep's lower corridors, and other things besides." "Find him," Robert said. "I will," Varys said simply, and for once there was no art in it. When Osmond had been sent away under watch, when 3 masters of the Street of Steel had been made to contradict one another until one folded and confessed he had taken coin to stamp his mark on work done in Lannisport because he had debts and a daughter with a dowry, when Yano Slint had been hauled in with sweat shining already on his lip and his jut of jaw gone uncertain, the king stood, his patience spent. "You are thieves," he told Slint and the masters and, by extension, the empty chairs of those who were not there to hear it. I have let thieves eat from the king's table because I could not be bothered to lift a lid. I will be bothered now. You are unwise to speak so in the open, Renly told him later. It scares the honest as it frightens the rats, and the rats scatter when you show them the light. They run to their cousin's cupboard and their uncle's cellar, and they find holes you cannot reach. Then we will flood the cellars, Robert said. Renly smiled, then sobered. Cersei is to dine with you tonight. Cersei can dine with the stranger for all I care, Robert said, but he went to the supper out of habit and something like duty, and because the queen was a danger best watched. Lancel poured. His hands shook. Robert let the wine touch his lips and no more. He could feel the queen watching him from under her lashes. The room was a bright trap of polished silver and green glass and the easy prattle of lords' wives. The rain is washing the streets, Cersei said at last, in that lovely low voice that she might have used to feed him lies if he had cared to feed on them. King's Landing looks almost clean. It will look cleaner in the morning, Robert said, and he smiled so she could choose to think he meant the weather. She did not. Her mouth tightened. You have disgraced a servant of the crown who has served since before you dreamt of war, she said. The conclave will not like it. The faith will not like it. The realm does not like a king who is seen to flail at his own arms. I flail at those that strike me, Robert said. And yet you miss, she murmured. He looked at her then as he had looked across a battlefield, eyes finding the heart he wanted to pierce. I do not think I will miss forever, he said. Later, when the dishes were cleared and the women's voices had thinned to whispers in corners and Lancel returned with the wine, Robert watched the boy tip the flagon and saw the set of his mouth and the candle's trembling light in the iris. He caught Lancel's wrist. It was thin as a reed. What did the queen tell you to give me? He asked conversationally. Lancel made a sound. His eyes went to Cersei and then he tried to pull away and could not. Robert squeezed until the flagon tilted and a thin thread of wine spilled across the table and ran down to the floor and made a red pool in the rushes. Boy, he said. The word had a weight in it that his men had known in another life. Lancel flinched. She said to keep your cup full, Lancel whispered. She said a king enjoys his wine and his queen should make sure he is not denied. She said if you came to the hunt sober, the boar would go home to his sow. Robert loosened his fingers. For a heartbeat he saw the boar as he had always seen it. Tusks like curved knives, hide like a tree's bark, a rush of heat and the red wet joy of the strike. Then he saw the tusk in his flesh, and Cersei smiling, and he did not smile. He set the boy's hand down. You will ride with me on the morrow, he said.
You will pour nos cap.
You will carry a spear. If you cannot carry it, I will have you beat until you can. And you will stop stinking of fear when I look at you, or you will stink of piss after I am done. Lancel swallowed. Cersei's eyes were green glass. You cannot threaten a Lannister in the king's hall, she said, too soft for any beside them to hear. I can do most things here, Robert said, and stood, knocking back the dregs he had chosen to drink. Wine that had sat in the cup untouched until the taste turned from sweet to old. It clung to his tongue like a lie. The rain had washed the sky clean by dawn. The hunt went out under a pale sun and on a wind that smelled of wet grass and pine. The king wore leather and mail and felt lighter in it than he had in a long time. He took a boar spear from Harlan the huntsman and found his hands remembered where to go on the shaft without looking. Men laughed and shouted and the hounds' tongues lolled red as banners. Lancel Lannister rode white and brittle, but he rode. They found the boar in a thicket that stank of him. He came out roaring, foam hanging in ropes from his jaws, and the dogs lost their nerve all at once and split. Robert felt his body remember the way men remember prayers when the ship breaks. He lowered the spear. The boar came on, black hair bristling, slinging spit, and he saw in the corner of his eye Lancel fumble for a knife he did not know how to use and another boy swing too late, a token blow, and then the world narrowed to the point of the spear and the socket behind the boar's foreleg where a heart beat hot and fast. He stepped in and drove it. The shock of it ran up his arms like striking a shield. The boar screamed. The spear snapped. Something hit Robert's shoulder like a hammer and tore a scream from his own chest he could not hear. He fell, rolled, came up with a broken haft and the boar upon him, tusks carving the air. He put both hands on the stub and shoved as if he could shove all his shame and whine and years into that animal. And the boar shoved back with the blind certainty of a thing that had never known fear, and then the point found flesh again and slipped, and again, and the boar's weight collapsed across him and pinned him and the breath went out of him in a rush. Afterward, when they pried the carcass off and dragged him to his feet, he laughed. It burst out of him old and wild and filled him up. His sleeve was torn and his shoulder bled, and he did not mind it. "There," he said to Lancel, whose face was as white as the pale sun. "That is how you drink." They brought the boar back on poles and hung him for the butchers. Robert bathed in water that went pink and then red and then a pale cloud and then clear. He stood naked and wide in his chamber and watched the steam curl. He felt alive. He felt as if he could lift the Iron Throne and throw it into the sea. When he dressed, he sent for Renly, and when Renly came he said, "Send to Winterfell. Send again. Tell Ned to make haste. He is hand. I want his eyes here when I tear down half my walls." "Ned Stark is not a man who enjoys seeing men stripped to their shirts," Renly observed, not unkindly. "He never enjoyed war but did it all the same," Robert said. "Tell him the realm needs him." He was in the yard when the messenger left. Watching the city watch drill with Pike's men in new mail had a way of moving as if they were thinking of how they looked in the new mail. Robert watched their feet. He thought of Slint sweating at the table. He thought of Baelish's round, amused mouth, and he thought of Varys's soft hands and the heat beneath the softness. He thought of how a realm was built not on boars or banners, but on whether a line of figures in a book told the truth. He had the good fortune to be thinking in that way when 3 of Varys's little birds brought him a packet wrapped in oiled cloth and tied up with string. It was a ledger of a different kind, smuggled out of the counting house near the docks by a clerk who had decided his fear of the king would outweigh his fear of the master of coin. The boy could not read. The boy's father could. Varys had made him read it aloud to 3 others and then written down what they had told him and then brought the original, thus layering fear on fear until someone's truth burned through. Robert read it, and when he could not, he let Stannis read and told him where to put his finger until the meaning came and stuck. It told of half-finished ships paid in full, of iron bought twice and delivered once, of loans taken from Lannisport factors at smiling rates and paid with the crown's honor, of names, oh so many names, that appeared at the end of lines of numbers the way stones appear at the end of a man's tether when he is flung into the sea. That was the morning Janos Slint was unseated and sent away to a stinking cell without his sash or his swagger. That was the afternoon Ser Jacelyn Bywater, big-shouldered and black-bearded, and with those honest iron eyes that had watched Ned Stark and approved without words, was given command of the watch. That was the evening Peter Baelish delivered himself to the king in a cloak of such sober cloth it might have been morning, and tilted his head and said, "We must be careful, your grace, that while we expose thieves we do not break the fingers of the realm's delicate hand for counting. Great houses will not like the bills you intend to send." "You have traded with great houses a long time," Robert said. "I will send them reckoning. If they do not like it, let them send it back to me and I will tell them what it costs to keep roads safe and pirates off the stepstones and grain coming into the city. And if they do not like that, let them come here and tell me in person so I can hear how their voices sound when they do not have other men to carry them for them." "That would be a music I should like to hear," Peter said, and his smile did not falter at all. "May I beg a favor? Let me order the accounts as you wish them ordered, and then I shall lay them before you in a tongue you can drink. It will be faster if one hand keeps the piles from blowing about." "You will order nothing," Robert said. "You will sit where I can see your hands." He gestured at a stool beside the table and was mildly delighted to see the little finger's lips part, for once, in an honest surprise. That night, when the castle grew quiet and the watchfires on the walls turned the air above them red, Robert could not sleep. He went to the Tower of the Hand and sat again before the ledgers and felt the ache return in his head like a reminder that not all pain meant decay. The door opened very carefully and Ned Stark came in. He stood for a moment in the doorway looking at Robert, and then at the table, and then at the empty chair where Pycelle should have been, and Robert saw his friend's face soften as if with grief and with something else Robert had not earned and did not know if he could. "You sent for me," Ned said. "7 hells I did," Robert said, and was on his feet, and had crossed the room. And then they were clasping each other like boys who had survived a blizzard and a wolf and found that laughter still lived. When they pulled apart, Robert gripped Ned's shoulder and said, "I am naming you hand now, in truth, with these books instead of a pin." "I would have preferred the pin," Ned said dryly, and there was that small hint of humor that had always seemed a surprise coming from him. He looked down. "This is a mess. It smells like the stables," Robert said, contended that the shame and the recognition could live in him together and not kill him. "Tywin Lannister has been lending me money and taking my city, coin by coin. Baelish has been building a pocket house out of my rooms, and Pycelle has been telling me what I wanted to hear. I am done listening. I want you to listen for me." Ned picked up a page and then another. He flipped through them with a frown settling. "Jon was reading this kind of book when he died," he said. "Yes," Robert said, "and I have in my mind what he might have found. Varys's birds are bringing me grains. I want to bake them into bread. There is talk of vials and of tears of liss." Ned's head came up sharply. "That is a poison," he said. "It leaves a man as if he had taken chill. There is no easy way to prove it afterward." "I will settle for a hard way," Robert said. "You will help me find the way. And there is another thing." He went to a trunk that had not been opened in years and took out a book, heavy, worn. Jon Arryn read this at the end. Pycelle gave this one to him, but Jon wanted the other. He was looking for the book that speaks of lineages and histories. He hefted it, and a laugh grumbled in his chest. "I did not want to be a king who read in bed," he said. "But perhaps I will be a king who reads at a table." Ned took the book and, reverent as always with what was old and steady, opened it with hands that did not shake. "It is here," he said after a time, tapping. "There is a mention I remember from when I was a boy and Master Luwin lectured us. The seed is strong. The Baratheon line breeds true, black of hair, large of limb." "I am large of limb," Robert said. "You are that," Ned said, and for the first time that night he smiled outright. Then the smile was gone. "Your children are fair." "My children," Robert said, and the words felt strange in his mouth, like an idol's prayer attempted by a man who worked wood. He sat down. "Sansa has eyes for my boy. I do not want to ruin the only thing I did well in my life by breaking her heart for a sum in a book." "The truth is not a sum," Ned said quietly. "The truth is a stone. It lies where it lies whether you look at it or turn your face away. Do you want it?" "I want it," Robert said, "but I will not take it like a coward. I will not die in the woods with a boar's tusk in me and leave you to clean up my blood. I killed the boar today." He showed Ned the torn sleeve like a schoolboy with a prize and was absurdly pleased to see his friend's grim mouth soften with what might have been relief and could still be called love. "You will help me carry the stone if it is what we think it is," he said. "You and Stannis. Between us we will do what kings are meant to do, which is not be liked." "Stannis will be pleased to hear you say so," Ned said dryly again, and Robert laughed, and the laugh made the chamber warmer. There were days after that when King's Landing felt like a thing shaking out a fever. Men ran with messages and slowed with fear when they saw a white cloak or a black feather. The Guild of Alchemists found themselves answering to a king who remembered names and who turned his head to fix them with a stare that made the eldest master's words dry up. The gold cloak stood straighter under Ser Jacelyn Bywater, whose voice carried like a bell and whose hand lay light on the hilt until it had to lay heavy, and then it did. Jaime haunted the halls like a youthful ghost of himself, smiling at the wrong times, bored when he should have been wary, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve with the same hand that had killed a king. The day came when Varys put a list before Robert and Ned and Stannis, and it had the name of the man called Cole upon it and 2 others, and underneath there was a note. "That man is dead, this one fled, the third keeps a room in the Street of Sisters and has a mistress who bites her lip when he lies and so knows too much. They took the third at dawn. His mistress bit her lip and told them what he had carried and when, and who had paid him in coin that smelled faintly of cloves and had been minted in Lannisport. He wept and told them he had fled to White Harbor once for safety and had been made to feel unwelcome. They put him in a room where the stones sweated and left him with his fear. When Pycelle was brought up from his cell at last to answer in a quiet room with no witnesses but men and truth, he swayed a little in the light. He had lost something in the dark that was not only comfort. Robert sat and watched, and Ned stood beside him, and Stannis sat like a blade in its sheath, and Varys leaned in the shadows, and Peter Baelish amused himself watching his nails. "Did you know what killed Jon Arryn?" Robert asked. Pycelle's lips worked. "Lord Arryn died of a chill," he said, and then fixed on that and did not let go, repeating it like an old charm. Stannis asked him about Tears of Lys. Ned asked him about Porthos Mark and about the Conclave's disapproval and about what men in grey had come and gone from the maester's door at night. Varys murmured and asked him who had counseled him to bury the hand quickly, which Pycelle had done with such haste that half the realm had not had time to dress in sadness before he lay under stone. Pycelle's scent of old flowers grew rank as he sweated and wept. He denied until the denials became a string of frog croaks, and then he confessed to nothing but being afraid for the realm. "The Queen counseled speed," he said at last, and the words were like small stones dropping into deep water. "A city must not be made to think itself leaderless. I have lived through many kings. I have known that there is a time to speak hard truths and a time to soften them. And if I have erred, it is because I grew weary and took the easy way. Do not hang an old man for being tired." "I will hang no man who does not earn it," Robert said. "But I will not keep an old man who was too tired to stand up to a queen who would feed me to a boar." He rose. "Pycelle, you are stripped of your chain. You will be taken to Old Town under guard, and you will tell the Conclave everything you have told me and everything you have not yet found the courage to speak. If they send me a chain, I will wear it with care." Pycelle sagged as if relieved, which enraged Robert more than a plea would have. "As your grace commands," he whispered. When he had been led away, Ned said, "It is not enough." "I know," Robert said. He reached for the Book of Lineages. "Then let us add stones to the pile until the wall will not be climbed." The wall grew. It grew when a washerwoman's boy, paid a copper by Varys and 2 by Peter Baelish without either man knowing, said that the Queen's brother had gone in and out of her rooms when the king was away on hunts. It grew when Gendry, a boy with arms like young trees and hair like spilled ink, stood awkward and embarrassed in a smithy and said that a lord with dark hair had once come to see him and looked at him strangely and pressed a hand to his shoulder and left with a face like a man biting down on pain. It grew when Ned went walking in Flea Bottom with an old cloak and came back with the faces of 2 boys and a girl in his eyes and the echo of their laughter in his ears and said, "They are yours." It grew until one evening Robert sat across from Cersei in a chamber that smelled of beeswax and flame, and the window was open to let in a line of salt air, and he said very simply, "They are not mine." She did not startle. Cersei did not do men the favor of showing confusion. She sat very still and said, "Whose are they, then?" "You know," Robert said. He did not say the name. He did not need to break another thing in himself to say it. She smiled very slightly. "I know many things," she said. "I know that a kingdom tolerates much. It tolerates kings who break chairs and women and oaths, and queens who smile. It tolerates debts when men can still eat. It tolerates bastards as long as they are in the right beds. It does not tolerate being told what it must give back when it has already paid." "You had Jon Arryn killed," Robert said. He felt nothing when he said it, and then he felt a great, strange calm that settled over him like a mantle. "You and the man who signs the letters you ask him to sign. You poured wine for me so I'd bleed in the wood and leave you to your pretty plans. You have sharpened a knife on my house. I will take it back." "You have never held it," she said. "You swung a hammer and then fell asleep." "I am awake," Robert said. She tilted her head. "Are you as good a king awake as you were with your hammer? We are about to find out." She rose. "If you tell the realm what you think you know, it will burn, and you will not be the man to put it out. You are not made for slow work and long nights." "I am learning," Robert said, and he thought of the ledgers and the ache and the rain and Stannis's voice reading and Ned's finger on the page, and the way his shoulders still hurt and how good it had felt to put a spear into the heart of a beast that had wanted his. "You will be confined to your apartments," he said. "You will see your children. You will not see your brother. If you try to leave, I will put you in a tower where the sea will teach you patience." She did not flinch then, but her eyes cooled. "Tywin will not forgive this. Let him ride to my gate," Robert said again, and this time he smiled because he meant it in a way he had not meant battle in a long time. "I have been hungry." Outside, the bells began to ring of their own accord because a new commander had posted men with honest weights in the market, and someone had fought, and someone else had paid, and it made a different sound when a city paid for truth. The sound carried up to the windows of the Tower of the Hand and down to the warehouses by the river and across to the Street of Steel. It went into the September and through the Red Keep's thick walls and down into the vaults where the alchemists kept their jars. They rang as Renly went to Highgarden with a grin and a plan and a promise to come back with a bride if he could. They rang as Stannis took the fleet from Dragonstone with sails as taut as a stubborn man's mouth, to put his grey ships between Lannisport and the golden road that led Coin to the Rock. They rang as Tyrion Lannister, returning from the Vale sore and wiser, rode into his father's camp near the Green Fork and looked up at Tywin's tent and saw the cold sun flash on the embroiders there, and wondered if the game he had been born into had finally become a hunt. They rang when Peter Baelish woke in the night and, with a cat's deft care, slid from his room to a passage even Varys's birds did not know and came out near the river in a boat that could be made to resemble any boat, and smiled to himself because chaos could be made to look like a ledger if you wrote neatly enough. He had decided the city felt too tight. The Vale was wide and green and full of women who liked a rescuer. They rang when Yano Slint's wife took down her husband's sash from its peg and stared at it and then set it carefully in a chest because maybe the world could still be put back in order if she put things in a chest. They rang when Arya Stark stood in a corridor and listened to them and thought, not of bells but of swords, and tried again to balance on one foot as Syrio Farrell had taught her. They rang when Sansa looked at Joffrey's profile and loved him still because girls love what they are told to love until the thing tells them not to. And they rang when Robert Baratheon, who had made a kingdom with a hammer and then nearly lost it with a flagon, stood before the Iron Throne and did not climb it but stood looking at it as if at an animal that could be hunted and eaten and then only remembered. He was not a beautiful man then and never had been, but he was for a moment exactly what he had meant to be when he had swung that hammer at the trident. He looked to Ned and to Stannis. Ned's jaw was set and his eyes were steady. Stannis's mouth was a hard line. Between them the truth sat like a third brother. Robert turned to the hall. "The crown is not a purse," he said, and his voice carried to the farthest pillar. "It is not a bed. It is not a pretty story. It is a weight and a duty. I have neglected both. I begin now to carry them." He lifted the papers Ned held out to him as if lifting a sword. "Hear the king's word. Yano Slint is removed from command of the City Watch for deer, liction and theft. Ser Jacelyn Bywater is commended to his post. The Guild of Alchemists will answer to the Master of Laws for every flask that leaves their vault. The Master of Coin will order the debts of the crown and lay them before the realm for witness. The Grand Maester will present himself to the conclave and give account for his counsel. The Queen is confined to her apartments until the end of the king's pleasure." There was a sound then, not of bells. Something in the hall moved like water finding its course. Men looked to one another and found in their neighbors' faces the answer to a question none of them had known they were asking. It was not love. Robert did not expect love. It was the other thing men like him fought for and could not name until they saw it. The moment when a city chooses to believe that the man with the hammer can also count. After the day had exhausted itself with proclamations and witnesses and nooses and pardons, after Cersei had tried the door and found it watched, after Jaime had smiled his smile and been told by Barristan Selmy that he would stand his post or resign his white cloak and be treated as a knight who had left a vow unfulfilled, after Peter Baelish's boat slid along unseen under the dark and turned out toward the open, after Varys sat in his room very quietly and breathed as a man breathes who has almost not been believed and is relieved to decide that he might yet be of use, Robert walked alone on the outer wall and looked down at the black water of the bay. His shoulder ached and the wind smelled of rain still, but the stars had come out over the city and shivered like coins. He had hated numbers. He had loved the easy victory and the hot rush and the afterward. He had loved a girl who had died and a dream that had died with her, and then had pretended for half a life that he had been robbed of something no one had ever promised him. He stood and let himself feel all of that like he might feel a bruise until it stopped throbbing. He would drink again. He would bellow again. He would be himself, and that would be sometimes a poor instrument for a king. But he had learned to sit at a table until a thing was done, and he had learned to hear truth when it startled him. Behind him, the realm stirred. To the west, horses stamped in 1,000 tents, and men sharpened swords, and a lord with a stone face counted banners and numbers and found both too small not to be angry. To the south, roses trembled on their stems, and a boy with a laughing mouth rehearsed saying a line that would charm a hall and bind a house. To the east, at Dragonstone, a man who could live on anger and bread stood on a prow and felt a sea wind lift his hair and thought he heard, beneath the surf and the creak of wood, the whisper of a throne. To the north, on the King's Road, a man with a wolf's look rode with his daughters, and thought of duty, and of a friend who had called him for the worst task a friend can give. Varys said the realm was a patient. Robert thought it was a hunt. There are things you can only do in a hunt when you remember what you are and what the beast is. He was not young. He was not the man he had been, but he had a spear and it had gone into the right heart today, and that would do. He turned back to the keep, and the wind took his cloak, and the bells far off were still ringing, though softer now, as if someone had hung their clappers in cloth to let the sound go on without startling the night. In the weeks that followed, the ledgers grew tidy. The city's merchants learned that coin went where it said it would go, or it did not go at all. The master of coins accounts arrived arranged by clerks chosen by Stannis for their plain faces and plainer souls, and Baelish presided over them like a priest who had been asked to bless a god he did not worship and made a show of solemnity to hide his boredom. The Iron Bank's envoys were met in the throne room and made to listen to the king enumerate the purposes to which their loans would be put, and they left with gloved hands concealing that they were impressed. Word came that Tywin Lannister had closed his gates and was answering letters with non-letters, and then came word he had called banners and marched against the Riverlands, which Robert had expected, because men like Tywin did not bring their numbers to a king's gate unless they meant to set them on fire. Stannis' fleet took 2 fat merchantmen out of Lannisport and burned a 3rd, and Stannis came back scowling that he had not taken 5. Robert clapped him on the shoulder, and for a wonder Stannis did not shrug it off. Ned wanted to ride to Riverrun at once. Catelyn's kin are in the path, he said, the single word kin full of more careful feeling than any man's speech with sobs. If we let Tywin away with this, he will think you have blinked. Robert weighed, and then he nodded. We will ride, he said, and that night he walked again alone and looked at the black water and thought of a war that would be a war, not a tourney dressed as one, and felt in himself a hunger that was not for wine and not for blood but for whatever it was that made a thing right with effort. He wondered if any man that had known him at the Trident would recognize him now. He decided he didn't care. He had his spear. In the morning, as he buckled his belt and the sound of the city woke, bells and hawkers, cries and hammers, he paused with his hand on the strap and thought of a boy with black hair hammering iron on the street of steel, and of a girl with gray eyes on a horse, and a queen in a high room counting days with a smile like a nicked knife. He thought of a brother on the sea, and another in a garden, and a friend who would say the hard thing with soft eyes. He thought of a ledger where the numbers made sense at last, and of a book that began, "The seed is strong." "Good," he said to the empty room, and to the boar skull they had hung on a nail as a joke and a ward. Good. Then he went out into the morning to meet the men who waited on him, and the rain held off, and the sky was a pale, honest blue, and he found that a man can teach himself the taste for truth if he has to, and that some days it even tastes like wine.